Hello, everybody. Welcome to our last meeting for the quarter. We'll be discussing ribbons and how to make them. So, what are ribbons? They're basically a super flexible setup that can be used in rigs. It typically comprises of a NURBS plane or a NURBS surface with a series of joints and end hair follicles. It's pretty solid to add on to a section of a biped rig. They're basically an inception in a rig because you've got basically your joints that are being bound to your skin are at the base layer. They're parented to follicles which follow a NURBS surface which have joints controlling that NURBS surface, which causes a larger the joints that are on your follicles to move around in a bit more natural of a way. You can use them. What can you use them for? Due to their very flexible nature, it can be used for a multitude of setups, whether basic or advanced. Some common usages are spine, limbs, tongues, lips, creature rigging for tentacles, tails, fishes. And the possibilities are really out there. You can really do a lot of weird things with them. They can do some pretty cool stuff that are more advanced and procedural, like sign functions, noise, twists, volumetric deformation, and advanced facial setup like sticky lips, for example. I know that I use ribbons a lot for lips and eyelids and eyebrows. But mostly brows and lips. This is an example of Zio by Hernan Aries or Mr. H on Instagram. If you follow him on Instagram, you can see his general, very specific breakdowns of part of his Zio rig, and it's really, really cool to watch. He goes into a lot into detail on the topology of it. It's really cool. But one example of a setup you can do is a bendy limb. It allows you to get more toony poses to your limbs, and they're great for posing in a more rubber hose shape or removing the pinching you get at the elbows or knees. The only adjustments that you make beyond a normal ribbon setup is adding a few more constraints to make it a bit more friendly with the other limbs in the chain. So this is a setup of an arm bendy limb setup and a leg bendy limb setup. But with that said, Roman can take it away on what they're used for, or why they're used.
Yep. And so, one of the reasons that they are used is just because the deformations on them are pretty natural already, and they automatically they act automatically without much input from the animator. So in this example, so this is a NURBS ribbon, and we've got a joint hierarchy set up on it. Now you can see when the joint is when one joint is pulled up, the others around it actually start to get pulled up as well, but they're not they're not on the same level, but they're not on the very bottom level. They kind of act as a mediator between the top joint and then the other joints, and it also works with the rotation axis. So it's like when you move one joint up already, you have the rotation and movement of other joints behind it already. Yeah.
With that said, Dara will talk about how do you make them and the pros and cons on them.
Yeah, I'm just gonna give a very simple rundown, but if you would like a demo on the ribbon setup, please ask. But essentially, you're creating a geometry using a NURBS plane, or so you can use the default NURBS plane with some modifications, or a lofted surface, but you need like a NURBS surface. Um, and then you will create a follicle system through end hair on that plane. After that, you'll delete the extras. So that would include like the nucleus, the follicle curves, the hair system that would come along with it, because you only want the follicles. You'll be only using that for this setup. And then you'll be creating a joint to become the child of each follicle that will follow the geometry. So each joint will be a child of each follicle. And then you will create driver joints, which will then influence geometry joints and follicles, and you will bind it to the NURBS plane. And of course, you'll add controls to that to where you'll move the driver joints and thus as you like kind of shape this geometry, this NURBS plane, you'll be like also shaping the skeleton. So that's kind of how it's used. But yeah, this was a very like simplistic rundown. So if you need us to go more in depth with like a demo, please let us know. And then just some quick like pros and cons to sum up how like the ribbon setup. For pros, I think it's great for cartoony rubber hose type rigs, anything that you need with curves and bendiness. It's extremely flexible and versatile. And as like Roman was talking about, you get like an immediate like fall off, nice like twist and stretch, and just like the joints kind of like follow a little bit. So you kind of get those immediate results upon setting up without doing like no extra steps. They're just kind of like a result of the setup. And then just like advanced features and setups can be stacked on top of it. Overall, I just think that ribbon setups are neat. But as for cons, it is considered a more intermediate setup and in some cases even more advanced. So it's not something that a beginner would do right away. And then it's pretty beefy when you could probably just settle for a more basic joint setup that's just free floating. So it's kind of just like a lot, but you don't get the benefit of deformations if you just do free floating joints. And then just a little joke, but like I know Roman had a tough time
I was
scaling
having an awful time
with ribbon
with
rigs.
constraining scale from a model to and applying it with a ribbon rig as tough.
I sympathize with that. You're not alone, Roman. So yeah.
Just about covers it.
Has anyone heard of the flexi plane or flexi chain rig?
I have not heard of
Kind
that.
of like it's pretty.
No.
It's a digital tutors thing, and it's very similar to a ribbon rig, except it uses IK spline, and then you get for the twist it uses locators as up vectors for objects, and then it basically does everything like a ribbon rig does, except yeah, without an actual NURBS plane. But it's pretty similar. I don't know. You might be able to find stuff online on it, but it's also a cool thing to check out.
That makes sense. Yeah, I've seen a lot of people talk about. I've seen a lot of people kind of just go in between IK spines or ribbon spines. So I could see that. Yeah, that's really cool.
Is there like a website, Kenny, or something?
Well, right now, I have a subscription to Digital Tutors or Pluralsight as they are now, and that's where I heard about it. I don't know if you'll be able to find it like off of that, but yeah, I don't know. I won't make any promises since we're recording.
Fair. Would you guys want us to go over how to make a ribbon rig? Just from scratch?
Yeah.
All right.
Sure.
Dope. I'm gonna switch the screen share to Maya, which where is it? That should be it. You can see Maya.
Yep.
All right. I'm gonna try and keep this as in just this window as possible, but basically, we're going to be creating it based off of a pre-existing geometry, because I have seen people who create like a NURBS surface by default and try and place it on the skin. I prefer to just select edge loops, but I'm just pointing that out, that you could always just create a NURBS surface and try your best to line it up to the geometry. But I'm just going to select an edge loop. Go up to modify. You guys won't be able to see this. I'm gonna see if I'm actually gonna change screen sharing so it's just my screen, so it might just, so we don't have to worry about that. This is that one. Okay. Can you is it loading pretty well? Is it lagging?
It's lagging a good bit.
Okay. I think that this will be the only thing that I need to really use this part for, so I'll just switch back. But go to Modify, Convert, and go to Polygon Edge to Curve. You guys can see that, right?
No, it's doing that thing again where it shows like the Discord screen and then like
that's-
bars of the Maya
Oh,
screen.
that's gross.
It's like cut off.
Oh, that's gross. I'll just go back to the... Let's go back to this then, and I'll just go back to Maya. But so if you go into your Modify menu, I'm gonna see if I can actually dock it. No, you can't. So if you go into Modify up here, you can go down and it's the third from the bottom. It's a Convert menu, and when you click on the Convert, when you hover over the Convert menu, it gives you a bunch of other options, and the fifth item in that list of commands you can run is called Polygon Edge to Curve. It's basically a blue snaking NURBS curve with a with like an outline of a sphere running along it. So when you click on that, we'll just go with the default settings for this. You'll be given a NURBS curve that goes along the selected edge loops that you used. So I'm just going to name that as the curve for now and delete history because we don't want that input there. And I'll center the pivot real quick. Duplicate this, translate it up on the y-axis, and I'll just freeze transforms for sake of measure. And command select it. Go up to your menu here, and under surfaces, you'll have the first thing under the first item you'll see is loft. We'll just make a basic loft, and now we have a NURBS surface created. I'm going to delete history on that and delete these because you don't need them anymore. So with that done, we now have a NURBS surface, and it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 there. Okay, that's cool. But we're gonna go to FX, click on N hair, and the first item is create hair, and I'll open the option box there, and I'm gonna switch the screen sharing again. Okay, so you can see it again?
Yep.
Okay, we're gonna go to NURBS Curves. Set the, I believe it's V count, to 0, and then we're going to set this to 6, for example, for this case. We'll go to static, and we'll change this to static because we don't want it to do anything, and we'll create hairs. Hopefully Maya doesn't crash on me. Might have done something wrong there. Probably shouldn't have set this V to 0. There we go. So yeah, accidentally set the V to 0, and I'm going to switch back to showing Maya. So when I set the V to 1, I have this now. I want to delete the nucleus, the output curves, and the hair system because we don't need that. All we need are these follicles right now. I'm going to hide the torus and grab this real quick and go into the control vertex and move these around. So you can see that the follicles completely stick to the surface almost perfectly. That's what will basically help us create our ribbon. Okay. And what we want to do is properly place them. First, what I'm going to do is shift select everything, hit the down key, and then the right key. Because what that does is, what the down key does is go to the next item in the list, but the next item in this hierarchy is its shape node. So we type right to go to the next object, which is a separate curve node that we don't need. So we'll just delete them all. With that done, we'll start positioning the parameter u to fit along the curve a bit more. So I'll type 0, let's go like 0.2, 0.4, 0.6, 0.8, and 1 for this example. I think that lines up. Oh, cool, it does. What you would want to do is rename these, but this is a demo, so we're just going to keep it a bit short. Type in joint in this mel line right here, and you'll have a joint centered perfectly on it. So I'm just going to go through that real quick because that'll actually rotate it all perfectly. So we're just going to type joint in the mel line, and it'll align itself perfectly. When we click this, we can hit the up arrow and it'll reset. It'll go to our last use command, so we can just keep doing that over and over again. All right. So with that done, I'm going to create another joint and center it here, and I'll title this bind joint 1, and I will group it to itself twice, just because that's what I like to do. Bind joint 1 group. Okay, thanks for that. Bind joint 2 1 offset group, and we'll duplicate this a bunch of times. I want to be able to control the middle, and then the ends for this case, so I'm just going to create 3. And I'm just going to do some quick name fixing. Go to 1, change that to 2, and 3. Okay, so now that we have these set up, we have basically a bind joint that we're going to be skinning to the loft right here, and they're offset joint groups that will help us keep things clean a bit. So we're going to hide these for now. We're going to click on the loft, and when you right click, you'll be able to see like your marking menus for like control vertex, surface patch, etc. What you want to do is right click and hold and go straight up so that you can see isoparm. And once you do that, you can click on the horizontal line here and draw an isoparm and draw a new edge loop right here that goes down to about the middle. It doesn't need to be exact. So with that done, we've created a temporary edge loop right here. And what we want to do is go back to the modeling tab, go into surfaces, or no, curves, I believe. Yeah, curves. And once you go past the modify menu, you'll have an edit menu. The first edit menu will be duplicate surface curves, and you can do that, duplicate it, so now we have a curve right here on the surface. What we want to do, this is what I usually do. I don't know if this is done by a lot of people, but because I haven't really checked. I've seen a lot of people who typically build scripts for this, so I just gave the motion path a try. What we want to do is go into our rigging menu so that we can see the constrain menu, and click on it, and under the pole vector constraint you'll see a motion path drop down menu, and you'll click attach to motion path. And once we do that, we have a start and an end, and over the course of this timeline it will animate to go to there. We don't really need to care about that, so we'll just duplicate that function for all of them so they all snap to the motion path. Bind joint 3, I can go to the U value under the motion path and fix that and set it to 1. Bind joint 2 can go to 0.5, and once we've done that, we can select them all, go to motion path 1, break the connections. I think that, that fixes it for them all, I believe. And then we'll select them all again, go to the rotates and translates, break those connections, and then delete the surface curve so that we get rid of the motion path input that we had here that was making things a little dirty. Lastly, I'm going to go to all of my joints and go to display, transform display, which is about the middle of the menu, and click on local rotation axes so that we can see where all these joints are pointing, so that we can make sure that they're all identical, essentially. And once we do that, we're going to, with all these joints selected, we're going to control select the lofted surface that we made and go and just bind skin. Once we do that, we can move these around, and we have bound it to the skin. We'll reveal the follicles again, and when we do this, you can see the joints are following the skin perfectly. With these bind joints set up, we've basically created our control joints. So we'll go throughout the simple process of creating an FK control. We'll just set that all up real quick. And with that done, group it, and group constrain them all together. And when we hide these joints, we can now move the entire ribbon around, and it pretty much functions just fine. And that's essentially how you set up a ribbon rig. Does anybody have any questions beyond that?
Now you gotta scale it.
Okay. Well, that's gonna be fun. So when it comes to scaling these things, we're going to be doing a little bit of blend shape work. I don't think I can do this without showing the shape editor. I think I can pin the shape editor though, so I'm just going to do that. So if you go into Windows, Animation Editor, Shape Editor, you can pull up your shape editor, and I'm going to pin it to the side so you can see it. It's basically your blend shape menu. That's what I use it for. I'm going to group this all into a ribbon joint group, and we're going to group all these controls into a control driven group. What I'm going to then do is add a suffix called driven. Then we're going to group these into a ribbon group. Once we do that, we're going to duplicate our control driven group, and I'm going to be changing this suffix of driven to driver, just for this example. They all have different names. Okay, good. I'm going to add these suffixes here just so that doesn't become an issue at any point. And once we've done that, we're going to go into the connection editor. Oh no, I can just pull up the node editor. So let's go to let's go to panel, node editor. Okay. Let's see, group 2 driven. So let's grab the NURBS circle, driven, and driver, display their connections, or let's actually just clear it and put them both in here. So what we want to do now is have the driver connect to the drivens, control the drivens, translates and rotates. So let's go to translate, have it control the translate, and go to rotate, have it control the rotate. And we'll repeat this process for the other 2 controls. And when we go back to the perspective view, our old controls have these yellowed out values, and these controls are our driver joints. So the reason why I did that is because if you wanted to scale these joints, no matter what I've really done, I've never really been able to find a way to make them scale a bit friendly with each other. So I've always really connected them to, I've only really connected them to a external setup with a blend shape, more or less, by duplicating the controls and connecting them with the connection editor. With that said, I'm going to go into the follicle group and turn off the inherits transform. And I'll do the same for the lofted surface. I'll hide the driven group because that's not really relevant anymore. Everything still works just fine. And what we will want to do now, let's see. Let's make like a quick, let's grab the torus again, and we will, for the sake of this example, just make it like only these 4 like edge loops, so it's just a bit easier to work with, and we don't have to worry about the funky skinning. And delete that. Okay. So we've got that set up, and what we want to do now is call this the torus base, and we'll duplicate it, call it torus ribbon geo. And for the scaling purposes, I'll just create a circle, scale it up a bit, and we'll call this root. The ribbon geo will be bound to the follicle joints for this. So I'll just down and right, select all the joints, go to the torus ribbon geo, go to skin, bind skin. So when we grab, I'm going to hide the base geo for a second and grab this. Skinning's going to be awful, but yeah, we get the example here. Everything's moving just fine. And with this, we are going to group this into our control group and parent it here. And I'm going to group these two into geo group and ribbon group. Okay. And I'm just going to group these into rig. Okay. With that done, we have our control group. We can scale this up. And you can see that the controls scale up just fine. The problem is that this geometry isn't. So I'm going to, first I need to skin it to something. So I'm just going to put a joint in the center. Call it root. Make it a group, joint group, because that's my OCD. Put it in there. Grab this root joint and skin it to the base geo. I'm going to hide the ribbon geo for now and skin the root joint to the base geometry just so it has some skinning data in there. And I'll get rid of that. Okay, so with that done, we're going to select the torus base, and in our shape editor, we're going to create a blend shape. I'll just call this global scale BS. And then we'll select the ribbon geo and then command or control select the base geo, go to create, add selection as target. It's the third item in the list, and set this value to 1. So with that done, if I go to this control right here and move it, you can see that this is working just fine. And if I've done all that right, if I scale this up right here, there's nothing happening because I don't have any scale right here. So what we want to do is have the root scale constraint on the joint group, okay, and also parent constraint on the joint group right there. So when we move it around, this works just fine. I'm going to hide the ribbon group because that is just extraneous stuff. Works just fine. Scale it up. Works just fine. Basically, it's about the key point here is that the problem that comes with ribbon rigs is that their scale can be a bit unstable, and you want to remove as much of that from your controls as possible. So what we did was we only connected its translate and its rotate directly to these controls. So if we used a constraint in this case, whenever these controls moved via another parent, the secondary controls that are in here that currently have the connections applied to them would have been following these controls right here. So they would have essentially been transforming and they would have been translating and rotating to accommodate for the changing scale of these controls if we just parent constrained them. But since we translate and we directly connected them, they are not following them in space. They're only really. I could actually really just show it. But when we move these around in space, and I can move these driven controls right there, you can see that they're essentially in their own separate space of existence. And they don't really even become activated when until I properly move these controls right here.